See like that?
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are at 8:30. We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order here. Welcome to the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Brian, and I am an alcoholic. This is a one-hour speaker meeting that meets every Saturday at St. Paul's Lutheran Church, 301 North Main Street in Doylestown, PA. The food and the fellowship for this group starts at 8 o'clock, and the speaker comes on at 8:30. The business meeting for this group meets every Saturday, 7 p.m. to 7:30, so feel free to come early and join us. Enjoy the coffee and refreshments we put out. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and teachings of the 12 steps. We record all speakers so that others can benefit from their message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. Is there anyone that is new or visiting from out of town that would like to introduce themselves on a first name basis so we can welcome you? Yeah.
Jerry,
welcome. Yeah. Zach, welcome. Yeah.
Mike, alcoholic.
Hey, Mike. Welcome. Yeah.
Hey,
Tyler, welcome. Yeah. Jenna, welcome. Awesome. We got everybody okay? The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with a working knowledge of the 12 steps and who is willing to sponsor, please raise your hands. So if you are out there, you're new, you're struggling, we got a lot of people willing to sponsor. Hang out with us after the meeting. We'd love to talk with you, recommend some meetings, get into the solution a little bit. Are there any announcements from the floor for the good of AA? Nothing from the floor. A couple quick announcements from this group. First off, this group will be hosting a workshop that's going to be on December 9th. We're going to start at 9 o'clock in the morning. That'll go all the way up till our regularly scheduled time of 8:30, where we'll have our speaker on. There'll be a free lunch provided. We got speakers coming in from all over the place. You don't have to register or anything. There's no cost. Everything's free, supported by donations, of course, so feel free to show out and join us. We have flyers. If you want a flyer, we got it available. You can take a picture. There was one hanging back on that wall. We got flyers you can take a picture of with your phone, or we can send it to you. So, again, see me, any home group member after the meeting if you're interested in that. This group has a sister group, which is a big book study meeting. It meets every Thursday, 7:30, just up the street here. That's at Salem UCC Church. That's 186 East Court Street in Doylestown. And the coffee for that meeting's on at 6:15. So, again, feel free to show out early and join us. We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purchase of big books or CDs to help those who cannot afford them can put their donations in that jar on the back table marked Big Book and CD donations. All CDs are available free of charge. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown. We post our speakers from this group on there. We also post speakers from a meeting we have on Monday, 6 o'clock. It's a step speaker discussion meeting, so feel free to join us for that. That's Monday at 6 o'clock in the room right next to here. We also have a Facebook page. It's a good resource to have. We post the speakers that we have upcoming and any events, anniversaries. A lot of other groups post stuff in there, so it's a good resource to have to stay tied in with happenings throughout AA in the area. And with that, I believe Nick's going to come up here and read our Just for Today prayer.
My name's Nick. I'm an alcoholic. Welcome home. The Just for Today prayer of recovery. Just for today, I will be agreeable. I will look as well as I can, dress becomingly, talk low, act courteously, criticize not one bit, not find fault with anything, and not try to improve or regulate anybody except myself. And now with that, I'd like to introduce Steve to come up and read the preamble.
Good evening, everybody. Steve, alcoholic. Hey, Steve. Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, and does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and to help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. And I now will have someone read the 12 steps of recovery. That will be Ron.
Good evening. My name's Ron. I'm an alcoholic, and definitely welcome home. Here are the AA 12 steps of recovery. Step 1, we admit we're powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become unmanageable. Step 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Step 3, made the decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Step 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. Step 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Step 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Step 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs. Turn it back to Brian.
Okay, seventh tradition, every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. At this time, we'll see that the basket makes its way around. There are no dues or fees for AA membership, but we have expenses, and your contributions help us to cover the cost of food, rent, big books, workshop, CDs, so we do appreciate it. There's absolutely no smoking on the church property. We get the privilege of using this beautiful facility to hold our meeting in every week, and that's really all they ask, is that we keep the premise clean. So just be considerate of that as you're coming and going from the meeting. Please take a moment to silence cell phones and limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. Now to introduce our speaker for tonight, a good friend of the Conscious Contact Speaker Group on loan to us from the By the Book Group of Kingston, New York. Please help me welcome Jake J.
Good evening, friends. I'm Jake. I'm a recovered alcoholic. Grateful to be with you here tonight. I love this meeting. Such a good group. I actually come from a group. I'm from Buffalo, New York originally. I'm coming to you from Kingston, New York, which is in the Hudson Valley. It's just about an hour north of New York City, so it didn't take me, took me about 2 hours to get here, which wasn't bad. Last time I came here from Buffalo. That was more like 6.5 hours, so this was much easier. Well, we have a group just like this one in Buffalo, New York. It's called the Depth and Weight Speaker Group. And actually, we've actually borrowed some of your stuff, so thank you. You didn't even know that, but thank you. So I really like this group. I'm grateful to be here. A friend of mine is actually speaking here next week, Ryan. So it's really important to me that no matter what happens, you let him know that I'm a better speaker than he is. I would appreciate it. My sobriety date is November 1st, 1997. So this is an anniversary month for me. And when I'm around my anniversary, I start thinking about December of 1996. December of 96 probably doesn't mean much to most people. But to me, it was the beginning of the end of my drinking career. The scene was this. I was in a jumpsuit and handcuffs and shackles. Court was adjourned, and instead of joining my inmates to go back to the maximum security detention center that I was living in, I was brought into a small room. And in that small room was a piece of paper and a man standing in front of the piece of paper that I had to sign. And what I was signing my life to was to the state of New York on a black ankle bracelet parole. And that man said to me in no uncertain terms that if I signed this piece of paper, that meant that I would not drink for the next 12 months. And that if I drank, if I was caught being drunk whatsoever in the next 12 months, I'd violate my parole and come back to the maximum security and serve quite a bit of time, way more time than I'd wanted to serve, that was for sure. And I remember looking at that piece of paper and hearing him say that and not thinking about it, not thinking anything of it. Never once dawned on me that maybe perhaps I couldn't not drink. See, but to that point, I didn't try to not drink. My drinking career is characterized not by not drinking. Why would I do that? I love drinking, right? But rather it is characterized by countless vain attempts to control and enjoy my drinking. What do I mean by that? I want to drink the way I want to drink, right? I want to go out and tie a good one on, but be able to show up for my old lady the next day or show up to work for the next day and not lose the job and certainly not end up in jail. And I want to drink the way I like to drink without the consequences that follow. And I'm obsessed with this idea. Obsessed with it. I'm desperately trying it, one experiment after the next. So when they say sign that sheet of paper, I'm thinking this is a good opportunity for me. This is a good opportunity for me to get my life back together, to rekindle things with my family, to be able to I thought about baseball. I loved baseball. At one point, I was called a prospect by the commissioner of Major League Baseball, an up-and-coming prospect. And that was long gone. You can't pursue a baseball career and do jail time at the same time, right? It was long gone. And I had no idea that, and I thought, man, this is an opportunity for me to get back on track there, get back into school. I hadn't been in school in years. I just thought it was a wonderful opportunity. See, I had no idea that I was suffering from an obsession to drink alcohol coupled with a physical allergy that made it virtually impossible for me to not drink. I had no idea. And so I signed that piece of paper with absolute assurance and confidence. And I'm here to report to you that I was out and reformed for about 6 days. Actually, 2 days later, they had me in an outpatient, my very first outpatient class. And I sat in that class, and they said some wonderful stuff. They gave me some wonderful information about how to combat that first drink. It was sane and sound, and it was very reasonable. Things like, remember to drink through. Remember the first before the worst. Think it through. Remember when. Leave in a situation. All different kinds of really sound, sane, logical reactions to alcohol. Unfortunately for me, none of those things do me any good. Because where alcohol is concerned, I'm not sane, sound, or logical. I'm insane. Absolutely insane. So 6 days later, when I'm in my house, minding my own business, there's a knock on the door. I go and I see who it is. I'm almost expecting it to be my parole officer, who's already stopped by 15 times the first week I was out. And it wasn't my parole officer. It was actually two of my friends. Actually, one of my friends with some kid I didn't know. And we got talking, and he goes, yeah, man, I heard that you got out. I just wanted to come by and see for myself. And I'm like, yeah, I've been out for about a week. Things are going real well. And he goes, have you celebrated yet? And I said, yeah, we had a pizza party. And you laugh, when you're locked up for a while, pizza's really good. But it's not alcohol, right? And so he pulled his jacket pocket open. There was a bottle of Goldschlager in his jacket pocket. It could have been a bottle of anything as long as it was alcohol. And he pulled it out and he goes, no, man, I mean, have you celebrated? And I got to tell you, man, when I drank alcohol when I was 11 years old, when I first put alcohol into my system, I don't know about you, but I fell head over heels in love with the effects produced by alcohol. I sat there with two other buddies of mine, 11 years old, and down in a alleyway. We started pulling on a bottle of Southern Comfort. Imagine that, a couple 11-year-olds pulling on a bottle of Southern Comfort. I was choking and coughing. There was going on there. But, man, I just kept pushing through it. And I don't know if, the first pull wasn't as bad as the second pull wasn't as bad as the first pull, and the third pull wasn't as bad as the first two pulls, man, but something happened off drinking that liquor. And I thought the same thing that happened to me happened to my friends that were sitting there pulling out that bottle. See, I thought everybody that drank like me had the same effect, the same reaction, the same relationship, the same thinking towards alcohol. I didn't know that I was abnormal. I had no idea. But one of those guys that was sitting in that alleyway that day, drinking with me, went on to have He just recently had twins, and that makes kids 4 and 5. He's got a wonderful job, a nice house in the suburbs. He has no problem whatsoever drinking or not drinking, leaving it alone, or anything like that. That isn't my story. And the other guy that was drinking, he actually went on to be a highly successful businessman. He owns a house way bigger than I'll ever live in, and he has absolutely no problem where alcohol is concerned. But that's not my story. I had no idea that I was abnormal. I was different. And I loved the effects produced by alcohol. I went after that as a solution. I had never once looked at a bottle of alcohol up to and including that moment when he pulled out that Southern Comfort and thought to myself, ew, that's trouble. I shouldn't take any of that. It's not my relationship with alcohol. When he pulled out that bottle of Southern Comfort, I didn't think about the consequences of drinking. All I could think about was the relief that a few pulls off that bottle would bring. A relief that I desperately needed. That nothing else, no pizza party, nothing brings to a guy like me. So I started pulling off that bottle of Southern Comfort like it was nothing. And it set off the allergy to drink alcohol, and the obsession was back on. And I didn't get caught that day, but man, I couldn't wait till that next time I could get away with having a few pulls off of a bottle of whatever. And I kept up that way, and I just began to realize that I can't not drink. That I can't not drink. I remember I was in my, one time I got drunk and I came home, I was home after curfew, the alarm was going off, my parole officer was already there, I saw the cop car on the outside, he was in full uniform, he was ready to violate me. And I don't know what I said, we're good talkers, aren't we? We can get out of anything. I strung together some words that somehow got me out of it, and man, I remember him giving me one last shot, and I just felt really good about this, and I made this resolution not to drink that came from the deepest parts of my inner resources. I knew for a fact I meant it this time. I hated drinking. I didn't want drinking. There was nothing about drinking that I wanted anymore, and I said, I'm done. And my mother was in the room, and my mother actually used to introduce me, and rightly so, to her friends. She'd say, hi, this is my son. Lying is his native language. You know he's talking. If he's talking to you, he's lying to you, right? I mean, she didn't believe a word I said. That's rightly so. And she acknowledged this time. She said, I think this time he means business. I really believe that he has finally had enough. And I went to bed that night feeling good, like I did when I signed that piece of paper, right? This is going to be good for me. I can start things back. I can get back on the baseball track, get back into schooling, repair the damage with my family. I've drifted off into sleep with high hopes. And I woke up the next day. I can't remember or recall the events that took place that next day, but I can tell you that I was slammed by 6 o'clock in the evening. Slammed. I remember coming home. I was walking, and I needed to move into the street because I was stumbling so bad. I kept walking on the grass, almost tripping. So I was trying to walk down the middle of the road, trying to get home before that curfew went off, that box went off. And I remember kind of laying in my bed. I didn't get caught, and I was laying there thinking, what was that about? And I just kind of shrugged it off as, well, it was one last time, right? And I can tell you the next 2 days were the exact same way. It was August 19th, 1997. I sat in my backyard and I wanted to die. I wanted to die because I knew there was no drinking, there was no not drinking. And I didn't know what to do. And I ended up going to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous that day. All I had was an open meeting schedule. There was a meeting about 5 blocks away from my house. And I went to the meeting. This is an overreaction, me still being here 26 years later. That was not my intention, I can tell you that, right? I just went because I didn't know where else to go. I honestly didn't know where else to go. I remember getting there and I showed up a little bit late, and it's, people were talking and it was coming around to me, and I didn't know that you could pass an Alcoholics Anonymous. I had no AA etiquette. I didn't know any of that stuff. So it got around to me, and I didn't know that you could pass, so I just quoted Wu-Tang, Old Dirty Bastard. That was the first thing I ever said in Alcoholics Anonymous. It was all the wisdom I could think of, And then I remember thinking the rest of the time, I wonder if they thought that was slick, I wonder what they thought of that, And they kept talking at me the rest of the time, which I didn't like. I thought, talk to somebody else for a while. And then the meeting ended, and I wasn't sure, but it looked like they were going to stand and hold hands and sing or pray or something I wasn't interested in. And so I got out of there as fast as I could. And I'm walking down the street, and this man that was at that meeting, thank God, was taught that the 12 step of Alcoholics Anonymous says that it was his responsibility to carry the message to the man and woman who's still sick and suffering. Man, I am so glad they didn't just put their number on a piece of paper that went around that room and told me, call me if you're going to drink, because I would have been dead. I would have been dead. There was no way I knew how to handle that. Call a stranger? Are you kidding me? When I'm not drinking, I'm so self-centered fear and terror, I can't even order a pizza. I'll sit in my living room starving with plenty of money for a pizza, and I won't pick up the phone. I don't know how to do those things. And this man knew that, and he knew it was his responsibility to carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. So he got in his car as fast as he could, and he shot out to the street, and he looked back both ways, and he saw me way down there, and he shot down there, and he cut me off while I was walking, and he rolled down the window, and he said, get in, I'll give you a ride. Everything in me said, no, don't get into this car, but for some reason I found myself in that guy's car. And my goodness, he talked drunk to the drunk. He set the hook, that guy. He talked all about his drinking. He talked about what it was like to watch his mother with tears in his eyes. And you think to yourself, I don't know why I keep doing this. He got me to share stories about myself and my own drinking that I wouldn't have admitted to anybody. It was an incredible conversation. I don't know how long it lasted. It wasn't very long. And he had me make a commitment to go to a meeting the very next day of Alcoholics Anonymous, which I thought was drastic. 2 meetings in a row. This guy's a zealot. But I just knew. He said, I'll be here at 7 p.m. tomorrow. You just be here. That's all you got to do. All you have to do is be here. That's it. And man, that terrified me. Terrified me. But I knew I had to be there. And I was there, and he picked me up, and we went to another meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it was a room full of guys just like him, men and women that were just like him. It was incredible. I'm not one of these that rejected the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I loved the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous right out of the gate. I loved meetings. I think, looking back on it, part of the reasons why I like meetings so much is because I felt safe here. I mean, where else are you going to go to see a sign like that? I mean, isn't that just comforting seeing that and hearing that? Especially when you come from where we once come from. Nobody is saying, welcome home to me. It's safe in Alcoholics Anonymous. I loved it. I cherished it. It wasn't the feeling that I think I ever had in my entire life. And so that's what I would do is I come to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I went to lots and lots of AA meetings. I had a home group. I had a sponsor. I had a job in that home group. And I went to lots of meetings. On Saturdays, if you got up early enough, you could hit, where I got sober, you could hit 8 meetings, no problem, just on Saturday alone. And I'd do that often because I'd go to meetings. I wasn't trying to be a hotshot AA. What happened to me is I'd come to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous and I'd feel safe and I'd feel good and I'd feel okay, right? And then all of a sudden, because you guys are so selfish and self-centered, you'd leave me and go on to your own lives and your own world and jobs, and some of you had babies and all kinds of stuff. And I would be sitting there by myself. And what I began to realize without realizing it is that as much as I fell in love with the effects produced by alcohol, I can't stand the effects produced by just not drinking. I can't stand it. And I would start getting this anxiety out of nowhere. I couldn't really even name it. If you'd ask me what my problem was, I wouldn't even be able to articulate it, right? I could make noises, and Brad probably describe it better than anything I could put into words. I just felt awful and gray and down and dark, and then I would do that, and then I would fly off the handle. I've got a lot of violence in my life. I was a violent kid. I tried so desperately not to be violent. I'd watch these men in Alcoholics Anonymous to be gentle. And there would be men, and I would just want to be that so bad. And I'd go back out in the world, and somebody would look at me funny, and just something would come over me. And I wasn't able to act like I saw in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it just destroyed me. It destroyed me. It was almost worse than, at least I could say I was drinking when I acted like that when I was drinking. But this is me 2 weeks, 3 weeks sober, a month sober, over a month sober. So I come to the meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I think, I got to say something to somebody. And I'd come into the meeting, and I'd smell the stale coffee, and I'd hear the laughter, and I'd see the familiar faces, and I'd begin to feel better. And I'd be over in the coffee corner getting a cup of coffee, and somebody come up to me and say, well, how you doing, Jake? And I'd say, well, I'm just glad to be here. And they'd be like, you're in the right place. And I secretly was dying. And then on October 31st, it was a Halloween night, I decided to go see a friend of mine, and there was drinking that was going on there, and I took a few drinks. And I got slammed, and I almost violated parole that night, and it was a wild morning. And I came to, and I ran back to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I heard things like, you probably wanted to drink more than you wanted to get sober. That's not the truth for me. I wasn't given a solution. I had no idea. So I went to a lot more meetings, and I lasted for about the same amount of time, about 2 or 3 months, when this thoughts of killing myself became predominant. And this is the thing about that, guys, right, is that I would sit in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I had cologne on. I had a fresh, clean pair of shirt and pants on, and, I wasn't chewing my tongue or any of that stuff. I looked normal, right? And inside of my head, all I could think about was finding a weapon, a gun, and blowing my head off. I didn't say a word to anybody. And during this, and of course, I thought I was Mr. AA too. That only an alcoholic can be so down and desperate and depressed that they want to kill themselves, but at the same time think that they're better than everybody in the room, right? That's called untreated alcoholism. That's like the normal state of me, just not drinking, right? I mean, it's neurotic to the absolute core. And I was sitting there in this meeting this one time, this afternoon meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I had said whatever I had said, and there was this gentleman there who took notice of my wisdom. And he said to me, he goes, do you mind if you said something at the meeting that kind of struck me. Do you mind if you stay afterwards? I want to talk to you about it. And I said, sure, I'll stick around for a little bit to help this guy. No problem, And so everybody waited. I thought it was weird. He waited until everybody left the room. I'm thinking, what's this guy going to tell me, And when everybody was finally gone, and he goes, listen, man. He goes, I heard what you were saying there at the meeting, and I'm pretty familiar with the Big Book, and I didn't recognize any of that in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he said, and I figured since you were the one that said it, and he took a Big Book, and this probably didn't happen, but I swear this is how I remember it. He took the Big Book, and he threw it up into the air, and it spun around and magically landed in front of me, slid open, and just popped open on its own. And I don't think that happened. I don't think it happened, but that's how I remember it. And he said, since you're the one that said it, I figured you can show me where those things are in the book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And I told you, I come from violence. I was ready to leap over the table at this guy. I really was. I mean, how dare you? That's not loving intolerance. How dare you? And he saw that, and he goes, whoa, wait a minute. I'm not trying to piss you off. That's not what I'm trying to do here. He goes, I just know that if you don't know what's written in that book, then you're probably not living by what's written in that book. And if you're not living by what's in that book, you're probably dying inside. Got my attention. And he said, do me a favor and turn to page 62. And he had me read out loud the bedevilments. And as I was reading them, I was going, oh my goodness. Those bedevilments fit me to a T. It's exactly what was going on with me. And then he had me turn to the first page in We Agnostics. And he went over, if you have little control of the amount you take once you start, or if you can't quit entirely, you're probably an alcoholic. If that be the case, you're probably suffering from an illness, which only a spiritual experience will conquer. That was the first time I heard that. Now, I don't know if people were telling me that or what, but that was the first time I was open and I was able to hear that. And I said, well, what do I got to do? And he said, well, you got to be at my house 2 or 3 times a week. Can you do that? And we're going to go through this book and take the 12 steps. So that's what we began to do. We began to take the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he explained to me that I have this twofold illness, right? This mental obsession and this physical allergy. Man, that made so much sense to me because I used to beat myself up for throwing away a baseball career. How could I do that? Right? And I thought back to this time when I was young, and I was going to be the starting pitcher for at a playoff game, massive playoff game, underneath the lights against our rivals. Right? The two last undefeated teams going at it, going to the playoffs. I mean, it was all set up, and I was a starting pitcher. I woke up that day like, here we go. This is what I live for. I live for this stuff. I literally loved baseball more than I loved any human being on the planet. I swear to you. And that day the phone rang, and it was a couple boys from a few blocks away who had called and said, so-and-so just got released out of jail. A lot of us have done jail time. When we get released, what we do is we get together and celebrate, right? And so he said, listen, we got a couple cases of Budweiser. That is top shelf where I come from, right? You get Budweiser, that is top shelf. That's not Old English, that's what I'm used to. Old English, St. Ides, right? Budweiser, holy cow. In cans, nonetheless. So I'm like, yeah, okay. But I got this game. There's this dilemma, right? I got this game. But wait a second, the game's not till the night. It's in the morning time, and you start doing drunk math. You ever done drunk math? Right? Well, if I start by here and end by here, I'll be sober and with plenty of time to be able to do X, Y, and Z, right? Makes perfectly good sense. And I would be thinking through this process, and I'm getting ready to go over there. I'm thinking, should I drink or shouldn't I drink? And if I do drink, I should stop by this point. Maybe I shouldn't drink. And going back and forth, and I was completely consumed with the thought of drink. It was obsession to drink alcohol. And that type of thinking dominated so much of my life, I didn't know it was abnormal. I didn't even realize I had it. It was just living. And I remember going over there, decided, man, I made good time this morning. I got over here early enough. I'm going to have two, no more than two. I'm going to have one, no more than two. And really, I'm just over here because I'm a good friend. That's really why I'm here. It has nothing to do with the Budweiser. I want to be a good friend and welcome my friend home after the misery he just suffered innocently. I remember cracking that first beer, and I love the effects produced by alcohol, whether it's Goldschlager or Southern Comfort or Budweiser or Old English or whatever it is. I love what that stuff does to me. I remember having that first beer down into my belly and grabbing that second one and saying, I'm out of here after this. But man, that beer tastes and feels so good, doesn't it? So I had two, and then when I realized I had two, I said, you know what, I actually got time for one more. I remember making that announcement. One more, guys, and I got to get out of here. And they're like, yeah, okay. They didn't care. They didn't care whether I was there or wasn't there. It was all in my own head. And I remember having that third, and then a fourth, and a fifth, and a sixth, and a seventh. And there was people at that game that night that were at that party that made it to the game as spectators. And they couldn't wake up the starting pitcher. I was passed out on their couch. They couldn't wake me up. So when he says I have the obsession to drink alcohol, when he started to describe that to me, and I was able to put that into my own experience, my goodness, does that make a lot of sense. Coupled with that allergy, man, I thought I was making a decision to have two beers. I didn't know that as soon as I had that first beer, alcoholism made the decision for me to have the next 20. There was no way of stopping me from having the next 20. It doesn't matter how much I love you, how much I know this is the best job I've ever had, whether I call you mom, my little sister, it doesn't matter. Once I begin to put that alcohol into my system, it's calling the shots. I had no idea. And you wake up the next day. Remember the next day? Come on, you guys remember the next day. It's awful. It's awful. And the worst part about it is people are just so mean. You know, you're hungover and they've got these complex, difficult questions that nobody can answer. Like, where were you last night? What happened? I mean, really, those are gut-wrenching questions. I don't know. How do you say I don't know? I love baseball more than anything. I knew that girl was the love of my life. I knew that. I didn't want to lose her. How could you treat her like that? I don't know. And I get tired of saying I don't know, and I get embarrassed about saying I don't know. And so as my drinking progresses, there's less and less people in my life. Less people, the less questions. until I was eventually homeless. And in the streets of Buffalo, I was homeless in the dead of winter, and I was pulling violent crimes left and right to survive. I remember I would sleep in cars. I'd find cars whose doors were open, and I would just lay in the back seat of the car. And I was trying to get out of the elements. I had 9 more until for my arrest, so I couldn't get frostbite. So I had to get out of the elements enough. I didn't get frostbite. I remember sitting in the back of the car, and all I could think about was a warm shower and a hot bed. It's all I could think about. And I think tomorrow what I'm going to do is I'm going to get up and I'm going to do what I got to do to get enough money to get a sleazebag motel so I can finally have a hot shower and a warm bed. And I'd drift off to sleep every single night that way. And every single day I'd make enough money to get a sleazebag motel to get that hot shower and that warm bed. And I never once stayed in a sleazebag motel and had a hot shower and a warm bed. Because if it was the difference between sleeping and having a hot shower and drinking alcohol, I'm drinking alcohol 10 times out of 10. And I had no idea. See, the obsession to drink alcohol, this idea that I have this abnormal reaction, it just made so much sense to me. And it also meant that I don't have the power of choice to drink. See, I was running around Alcoholics Anonymous trying to not commit suicide, saying things like, I woke up this morning and I chose not to drink. My goodness, if you're a real alcoholic, that has been taken away from me a long time ago. I didn't have the power of choice to drink. It had left a long time ago. And I finally took the first step, which says I'm powerless over alcohol. That means unless something very, 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 very drastic happens, the time and place will come again that I will find myself falling desperate experiment to that first drink. It's going to set off that analogy, and all bets are off. And then he said, well, what about step 2? And I said, step 2 is about that God stuff. Can we just skip that? Not interested in step 2. And he goes, wow, you know so much about AA. Man, you should sponsor me. You know? He goes, that's not what step 2 is about. It's about opening your mind. He goes, is it possible you're wrong? And I was real polite and stuff. So I said, wrong about what? You know? And he goes, he looked me up and down. He looked at my ankle bracelet. He looked at me and he goes, in your case, everything. In your case, everything. And I go, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, what is it with you and religion? What do you got against religion? I said, I'll tell you what I got against religion. When I was 6 years old, blah, 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 and I just spun on this whole thing that happened to me when I was 6 at this church and yada, 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 all the stuff I witnessed. And he's going, man, that's a real shame. I'm really sorry that happened to you, man. That sucks, really. I'm just being genuine. That sucks. So what happened to the next church you tried? I go, what next church? He goes, you try a different church after that? And you figure maybe it's just this church, not all of religion? No. And he goes, so you're telling me based on one experience that you had when you were 6 years old at one church with one set of people, you have now determined that every church and every corner and every person that's involved in religion is just like that. And I just sat there and stared at him. I don't know what to say to that. And he leaned in and he goes, is it possible you're wrong? Not saying you are. Maybe you're right. But is it possible you could be wrong? You can't argue with that. Plus, he's a lot bigger than I was. So we get to the third step. The third step is a decision to quit playing God, essentially, right? Quit complaining, quit trying to control, quit lying, trying to make circumstances turn out a certain way, all of that stuff. I had a good experience years later that I think about from time to time. It was me and my wife before we had our daughter. We were swimming in Lake Erie, and we were out swimming and having fun, and we were coming back. We were just going to lay down on the beach and hang out there for a little while. And as we were coming back in, we heard these screams behind us, these little kid screams. And it wasn't like fun screaming. It was like, uh-oh screaming. And we looked around, and there was nobody around. And so we looked out there, and we were actually next to a wall. There's a break wall. There's actually an undertow. If you're not careful, you can become way out there quick without any effort. And these kids were way out. And so we immediately, my wife's not an alcoholic, so she immediately started to go help him. I'm thinking, man, I just got in from out there. No, I'm just kidding. So we start going out to get these little kids, and so she grabbed the girl. The girl was a young little girl, and started bringing her back in. There was a little boy, but older than the girl. Certainly nothing I couldn't handle, but every time I tried to grab onto this little boy, he kept knocking my hand off him. I couldn't get a good grip on him. He just kept knocking himself free from me. And the reason is because he realized, he understood that he was literally fighting for his life. He understood that this was a life and death errand, right? If he doesn't get himself back at the shore, he's dead. And so he was trying everything he had in him to get himself back to shore. The reality is, the honest reality is, if I'm not there to help him, it doesn't matter how hard he swims, does it? That lake is way too big for him. Those waves are way too strong. He's a dead man. His only hope was to stop swimming and let me pull him in. And inevitably, eventually I got a hold of him. I was able to snap him out of it, calm him down. And he calmed down enough that I was able to pull him in. And I thought, man, isn't that this deal? Isn't that this deal? Isn't that the third step? Man, stop. Swimming, there's nothing. We just said it in step 1. There's nothing you can do. You're donezo. Donezo, I'm donezo. Step 3, stop. Open my mind to step 2. Maybe you're wrong. Right? Step 3, stop. Try it this other way. So important that I do Alcoholics Anonymous somebody else's way. So important. So very important. And we wrote inventory, and my first resentment was my dad. I hated my dad. In fact, I hated him so much. I remember when I hadn't talked to him in years. He was a drunk, and he was in this rooming house. I was in these projects, hanging out in the projects, doing the same thing he's doing, but I still hated him. And I seen him in this rooming house, and I remember literally like turning around and going the other way. And my buddy was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I can't go that way," because I saw him coming. I thought I'm just going to walk by and ignore him. But as I got closer, I kept feeling this overwhelming urgency to go choke the life out of him. And I was terrified that if I got any closer, I was going to actually do it. That's how much I hated this guy. And I put him number 1 on the 4-step. And you know how this 4-step goes, there's those 4 columns. The first 3 are easy. It's a breeze, right? You know, who they are, what they did, how did it affect me all day long, right? And then there's some prayers and observations there, which I didn't even have at that point, right? And so now I'm just going into the 4th step, or the 4th column raw. And the 4th column is, what are your own mistakes? And I said to my sponsor, I said, "What, are you kidding me? It's an unfair question. I was a little kid when he did all that stuff to me. What do you mean, what are my own mistakes? I was an innocent bystander and all that." And he goes, "Well, did you ever attempt to forgive him?" And I go, "Why would I forgive him? What he did to me wasn't okay." And he goes, "Yeah, I know it wasn't okay. I know that. It's awful what he did to you. It shouldn't have happened. Horrible. Never okay. I'll never ask you to say that was okay. Have you attempted to forgive him?" They're 2 different things. 2 very different things. No, I never attempted to forgive him. No. He said, how about have you dragged his name through the mud your whole life? Any chance you get, put him in a bad light, tell stories about him, drag his name through the mud constantly? Yeah, I do that. Yeah. Well, that's some of the 4-step, right, or 4th column. He said, let me ask you this: Are you willing to try to forgive him? And like I said, he's bigger than me. It was getting awkward. I'm like, yeah, let's move on, right? In all honesty, that's right. Yeah, let's move on. Yes. The problem was I took a 3rd step, and God heard me say yes. Because 2 weeks later, guess who came walking into my home group with a day sober? My old man. And they knew right away who it was because they saw my face, and they took me and grabbed me outside and talked to me. And I began to have a relationship with my old man. It was a difficult relationship. It wasn't. I'm not here to tell you that it was the most wonderful thing ever. There was good times, there were a lot of bad times, a lot of fighting, a lot of difficulty, but I was able to have a relationship with him. And he ended up getting diagnosed with cancer. And he was in remission for a little while, but then the cancer came back, and when it came back, it was just all over his body. And so he was up in the hospital. He made me his healthcare proxy. So I got to sit up there and help my dad die. It was incredible. I mean, it was awful, but it was incredible, right? I mean, what a cool deal. I'd go up there and I'd try to feed him, and he was just withering away. I mean, literally, I put lotion on his back, and you could just count the ribs. I mean, it's just all bone. And one day, I was doing this for about a week and a half, and I was just like kind of burnt out on it. I said, hey, and he was doing real good this one night, he was doing real good, better than he had been doing. And I said, hey, old man, I said, I'm going to go to work tomorrow. Is that all right? I'll come after work, but I'm going to go to work tomorrow. And he's like, yeah, go to work, man. That's no problem. I said, all right, I'll see you after when I get out of work. So I went to work the next day. I got in the work truck, got everything set up, and as soon as I got everything set up and began to work, the phone rang, and it was hospice. And they said, you better get here quick. He took a turn for the worse. He hasn't got much time. So I dropped my tools, and I flew up to that hospital, and I walked in that room, and here's this man sitting there, and he is holding on for dear life. It was an awful sight, tremendous pain. And I thought, man, this is stupid. What are you holding on for? So I walked over to the bed, and I put my arm around him, and I pulled him into my ear, and I grabbed his hand, and I said, hey, old man, I don't know what you're holding on for, but I hope it ain't for me. You and I are square. And he squeezed my hand, and I felt him physically leave. See, I had no idea in the second step that all I had to do was begin to open my mind, and I had this tiny little insignificant conception of God, that it was a flimsy reed. It really was. That would turn into what has become the greatest fact of my life today. Fact, meaning indisputable evidence that there is a God. He is alive. And not only is he eager to forgive me, he is eager to forgive everything I've ever done and anything I will do. His love reaches far beyond my imagination. And he does things like that. How do you go from, I can't walk by you without choking the life out of you, to I am there in your dying breath? Only God can do that. Only God can do that. When I was out there hacking it up, like I said, I was very violent. I wasn't a good person. And I took this lady down, this old lady, elderly woman. She had a purse, and she was unfortunate that she crossed my path, because I went and reached for her purse, and she didn't let go, and I spanked her head off the concrete a few times. I kicked her, and I got the purse from her. I didn't feel anything for that. I literally felt nothing. I actually felt pissed, because there wasn't very much in the purse, and I was angry with her. That's how far gone I was. And here I am now approaching step 9. Oh, and this is the crazy thing about that woman. When I was in court, I was going back. This time I was going back and joining my inmates to go back into the maximum security. And her lawyer came running over and said, my client has a message for you. And I thought, well, I figured she would. See, in the world that I'm from, I just figured she'd say something like, she's got a grandson waiting to, retaliate, or, all that would have made sense to me. Perfectly reasonable, makes sense. That's not what she said. She said, my client wants me to tell you that she's praying for you. What? That was so far from me. I remember nights, multiple nights, just sitting on my cot, looking up, just thinking, what does that mean? What is her angle? Why would you pray for me? It made absolute no sense. No sense. It didn't dawn on me until I'm at my 9th step. And I had to make direct amends. So now I'm out there making these direct amends with the help of my sponsor. I love in our lineage, a lot of times, man, we'll go with, if you got a tough amends, we'll go with you. We'll go with you. We're waiting in the car. We're not going to walk up to the door with you. But we'll wait in the car. We'll listen to a speaker tape or read a book or hang out, have coffee, and wait till you're done, right? Well, I said to my probation officer, I said, I don't care what New York State says. There was a restraining order against me. I don't care what New York State says. I got to make direct amends. The big book trumps New York State law. He's like, no, it doesn't. And then my response was like, don't ever do that again. It also says that you can write a letter if you can't have direct contact. I'm like, well, I didn't read that part. So I wrote this letter, and I said, I got permission from the probation officer to write a letter. Can I write a letter? He said, yeah, but I got to read it before I give it to her. I said, that's fine. So I wrote this letter to her, and I made amends, but I said in the letter, I said, listen, you said that you were praying for me when I was in jail, and I couldn't possibly comprehend that at the time. But I have since your prayers saved my life. I mean, there's no doubt. When I look back, from that December of 1996, leading up to November 1st, 1997, that God's handprints and fingerprints were all over that. And I said, you saved my life. It saved my life. So while I regret so much what I did to you, and you didn't deserve it, I also got to say thank you. And so my probation officer read it, and he approved it, and he had to bring it to her, so he brought it over to her. He knocked on the door, and this is what was reported back to me. She came to the door, and he explained to her what he was doing, and she took the letter, and he said, I got to be present when you read it. And so she began to read it, and then she fell to the ground and started crying. And my probation officer said to me, what was in that letter? He was like terrified he was going to lose his job. He was like, what subliminal message did I give that was in that letter? So her husband, seeing this, came over, picked the letter out of her hand, picked his wife up, held his wife, read the letter, and was nodding as he was reading the letter. And he said, me and my wife have recently gone through something which has severely tried our faith, and this letter has repaid it tenfold. I said, come on, how do you do that? You know, my friend calls God the great recycler. He can take something so ugly, so tragic, and within a year turn it around to become such a beautiful thing. What a tremendous deal this is. Alcoholics Anonymous has offered me so much more than a way to quit drinking. Are you kidding me? It has offered me a way of life that is indescribably more wonderful than any life I could have possibly ever lived. I was just joking with my friends the other day. I said, when I go to heaven, first thing I'm going to ask is, man, God, why were you so good to me? And the reality is that he is that good to everybody who seeks him and tries to live by his will through the principles that are laid out in Alcoholics Anonymous. Step 10 and 11, step 4 through 9 really is training ground, isn't it? It's training ground for the rest of my life. It's training ground for 10, 11, and 12. When I get resentful today, I know what to do with resentment, don't I? 4-column inventory. When I got fear, strives, creeps up and run in my life, I know what to do with fear now. Right? I never knew what to do with any of that stuff before. Today I do. It's incredible. And I got you guys to help me when I get jammed up. Right? When I can't see that 4th column for whatever reason. I give one of you guys a call and you seem to be able to see it real clear. Real clear, right? And I thank you and love you for it. And I remember, though, after getting into the deal, I was like, man, I don't know. I feel all right, but there just seemed to be something lacking. I was talking to this one guy, and he goes, I know what your problem is. He goes, see, you came in Alcoholics Anonymous, you had nothing. You started coming to AA meetings, and they gave you a power strip. It's a spiritual power strip, but it's much like the physical power strip guys probably have at your house, especially during Christmas to plug in all those lights, right? And he goes, and so now you got this power strip, and it's not plugged in, so you start taking some steps. And when you start taking some steps, you actually find an outlet, and you plug that thing in. And then as you take more steps, you start to fill in the strip with different plugs in those outlets. And he goes, and you get up to step 11, now you've got the power strip, you got everything plugged in, it's plugged into the source. He goes, but what you're lacking is that little toggle switch, right? And in the physical one, it's marked off and on. And in the spiritual one, it's marked self-centered and other-centered, right? And he said, man, it's time to get busy. It's time to get to work trying to help alcoholics. That is the greatest gift that I have today, is that I get to help another alcoholic. I get to go back into that deal and help another alcoholic. There is no greater thing than that. My life's tremendous. I got a little girl, 10 years old. You know, in my family tree, I grew up terrified of my old man. I just got done explaining that. He grew up terrified of his old man, hated him. My great-grandfather hated his father. I mean, all down the line, you go all the way back. The kids in the family grew to hate and resent and fear the father. My little girl's 10 years old. I was just talking her on the way here. She's got no idea what it's like to be afraid of me. None. That's because of you guys. I married to this girl. She wouldn't have had anything to do with a guy like me. I can tell you that. Nothing to do with a guy like me. It's incredible. It's an incredible deal. But the payoff isn't that I can just enjoy that stuff. The payoff is that I am of service to God and the people about me. When I had that little girl, she loved the moon. I love the moon. I don't know about you guys, but I love the moon. And we used to go out all the time, me and my daughter, when she was little, and we'd look for the moon. And she'd be upset sometimes. The moon wasn't up there, or it was like, a sliver. It wasn't as pretty. She liked the full moon. Everybody likes the full moon, right? The moon is actually a lot like I am. A lot like I am. Very similar. Because the moon in and of itself has no worth or beauty. I mean, it's you can't see it. It doesn't exist in and of itself. It's a cold, desolate, potholed rock, right? And when we go out there and there's a full moon, we go, look how pretty the moon is. It's not really the prettiness of the moon that we're seeing. It really is the reflection of the sun, right? And the moon has a job to do. The moon's job is to position itself, to put itself in a position that it can reflect the sunlight, right? And sometimes the moon is doing a good job. It's a full moon, boom, blasting the sunlight, right? Fantastic. You clearly see the sun shining off the moon, right? And then sometimes it needs to make an amends. It's got to write inventory, right? It's got to make an adjustment, call a sponsor, go on a 12-step call, right? You just go out there, it's a little sliver, and that's just like me, man. Sometimes my job is to put myself in a position that I can reflect the sunlight of the Spirit. That my life shines as a testimony to a loving God that has touched my life and is now being used to touch other lives. And sometimes I'm a full moon, man. Sometimes I'm clicking on all cylinders, right? Sometimes I got to write inventory. Sometimes I got to make amends. Sometimes I got to call my sponsor. And those times I'm just a sliver, right? And I don't know tonight, guys, I don't know if I was a sliver or if I was a full moon, but I know that my attempt to carry this message has played a vital role in my relationship with God and my own sobriety. So thank you very much.
Okay, good evening again, everybody. My name is Brian. I'm an alcoholic. First and foremost, I want to thank Jake for coming out here tonight and sharing an incredible message of hope and recovery with our group here. A couple quick announcements, and we'll close down the meeting here. Again, the food and the fellowship for this group starts at 8 o'clock every week. Feel free to show up early if you want to get involved with this group. We got service positions available. Our group also has commitments at hospitals, institutions in the area. So if you'd be interested in coming out with us, carrying a message of hope and recovery to the sick and suffering on the front lines. You can see me, you can see a home group member after the meeting. We have one tomorrow night in Quakertown if you're interested. There's always the meeting after the meeting. So again, if you're out there, you're new, you're struggling, hang out with us after the meeting. We could always use some help putting away the chairs after the meeting. These chairs in the front and on the sides will go away, and the ones on the tables back there will stay exactly where they are. It's customary for us to thank our speakers as they come here on their own time and expense to share a message with us. So we'll usually form a line in the front here, and we'll thank our speakers personally. Thanks to everybody for helping out with the meeting tonight. Thanks to our greeters, our readers. Thanks to the ladies up front here for taking care of the kitchen. And most importantly, let's thank our speaker, Jake, one more time. And if you do care to join us, we have a nice way of closing. We're going to circle up. And as always, we'll close down the meeting with a brief moment of silence for the still sick and suffering alcoholic inside and outside of these rooms, followed by our Lord's Prayer. Our Father,
who art in heaven,